You are listening to the Business Talk podcast. I am your host Deepak. I am delighted to welcome Professor Jennifer Woolley, Professor of Management and Entrepreneurship at Santa Clara University, as our distinguished guest on today's podcast episode. Dr. Jennifer's research and teaching center on entrepreneurship, innovation, and the emergence of firms, industries, and technologies. Her recent work explores the dynamics between founding teams, intellectual property, public policy, and firm performance. Professor Jennifer's scholarship has been published in leading academic journals, including Academy of Management Discoveries, Organization Science, Strategic Entrepreneurship Journal, Journal of Business Venturing, Entrepreneurship Theory and Practice, Journal of Product Innovation Management, and Advancing in International Management Research Series. She is a frequent presenter at major academic conferences such as the Academy of Management, Strategic Management Society, and the Corporate Social Responsibility Americas Conference. She also serves on the editorial board of Oxford Research Encyclopedia of Business and Management. Professor Woolley has received numerous accolades for her research, including EGOS Best Paper Award, the Heiser Award for Outstanding Research, the Research Promise Award, the Booz Allen Hamilton Strategic Management Society PhD Fellowship, the Ray Watson Doctoral Fellowship, a Kaufman Foundation Fellowship, and Regent Fellowship at the University of California, Irvine, where she earned her doctorate. Before entering academia, she gained industry experience as a financial consultant and analyst with Ericsson Wireless, Ashley Kumar and Company, and Westhold Corporation, and worked in banking and international finance. In this episode, Professor Jennifer Woolley shares valuable insights from her research, Love, Labor, and Chocolate, why Copreneurs Thrive in Craft Businesses. So without further delay, let's welcome Professor Jennifer Woolley to the podcast. We're deeply honored to host you today, Professor Jennifer.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this. And thank you for the lovely introduction.
Thank you. Professor, what first sparked your interest in study co-preneurial ventures within the bean-to-bar chocolate industry? Was there a moment that made you think there is something going on here?
I don't know if there was a moment in particular. I had been studying bean to bar chocolate for several years and really digging into it, trying to understand what made the chocolate scene so unique. Um, what made people want to start a chocolate company in such a crowded space when you see big chocolate everywhere? So why would people do this? And then I learned more and more about the challenges of chocolate. The supply chain issues in terms of poverty for the farmers, environmental sustainability, and sometimes child labor and indentured servitude. And I thought this is really fascinating. So as I was digging through this, me and my co-author, we looked at who embodied this, who was doing the work, and we found these marvelous entrepreneurs who were trying to improve the world one delicious bar at a time. And so as we were doing this, we noticed that there were a lot of families involved, particularly couples. And by couples, I mean married couples or life partners. And it just got us thinking, is there something about the craft world that just draws these copreneurs, these couples in, and are they more successful than founders than people that are not life partners?
You found that about one-third of bean-to-bar chocolate firms are founded by life partners. Why do you think this particular craft business attracts couples more than others?
Well, it's really interesting. And just so listeners understand, fewer than 15% of all US businesses are started by copreneurs. And this is so this what we saw was more than twice the average. And if we look around the world, it varies, but 15 to 20% really is just about an average. And it does change by industry. But it's not an overwhelming pursuit. But at the same time, if you think about 15 to 20% of commerce, that's a lot of companies. So in our past work, we actually found something really interesting about craft industries, that they're more values driven and they're not as much about making money because there is a craftsperson involved in the making of these products. So people get into bean to bar chocolate not to strike it rich, as many of them told us. We didn't do this because we want to make a lot of money, but they wanted to live out their personal beliefs. And so things like making life better for cacao farmers or creating truly higher quality alternative to big corporate chocolate was part of their personal beliefs. Now, this makes sense, especially when it comes to copreneurship, because when you think about having your own personal beliefs that are embedded in a business, and you think about why you would start something with your dearest beloved, your other half, running a business together is the ultimate blend of work and life values. So being able to truly express deeply held values really appeals to copreneurs, and it allows them to do this across home, family, and business.
Your research shows that co-preneurial firms are half as likely to close. What specific dynamics between life partners seem to contribute most to this durability?
Well, that's an excellent question, and one that kind of brought to the forefront because there are plenty of reasons why you wouldn't want to start a business with your life partner. And one of the things that we talk about in our paper is the pros and cons. Not every relationship should start a company together. And you can think, would you want to start a company with your other half? Maybe not so much, but in craft, it makes a lot more sense. So, first of all, founding a craft business with your life partner is really special, um, especially because of those values that I talked about earlier and the unique team dynamic. We already have an understanding, or copreneurs already have an understanding of each other's personal and professional needs. They're in tune with who they want to be. So it makes it easier to work together, divvy up tasks, and balance things across realms because you're in tune with the person, not just the business. And these partners find it much easier to understand and respect each other's needs, which is really important across personal and professional domains. And this ultimately helps copreneurs organize their business in ways that not only supports them as entrepreneurs, but also the craft of making such a human-centered product and value that craft. And second, because couples go into this type of business that they're especially committed to values, they're they're living out the values in at work, at home, with their spouse, and it reinforces those beliefs and their ability to enact those beliefs. So instead of going home and having a tension between the workplace and the home life, there's actually a support system that makes you more able to be successful, that
Very insightful. Yeah,
non-copreneurs don't get a chance to experience.
yeah. Professor Jennifer, you mentioned that shared values are a core strength of co-preneurial ventures. Can you elaborate on how values are reinforced differently for life partners versus unrelated co-founders?
Sure. Um, and it's fascinating when you think about who founds companies and who you choose to work with in founding a company. Because when you're founding a company, you're going to be spending a lot of time together. And some people say you're going to be spending more time together than with your spouse. And that can be surprising when entrepreneurs get into this and they don't realize just how much of their life is embodied in a startup. So for copreneurs, they're already able to truly live out their personal and business values across the realms of their lives that that founders that don't have that link aren't able to do. So life partners are able to dedicate more aspects to the values, not just at the business, but the values across other areas, which reinforces it. And although we don't have performance data such as sales or profits, we suspect that life partners also have a different idea of what it means to be financially successful, because their success metrics aren't just about the bottom line, but also about how they're able to enact these values. And if their commitment to values over profit means that they're not in this to get rich. Now, when you have people that are not life partners, you don't have as much, typically what I've seen anyway, that deep discussion about how to enact those values across different domains. So you don't have the reinforcement. And not that it makes it weaker, it just makes a different dynamic in the team, in the founding teams.
In what ways do copreneurs organize their work and responsibilities differently than other founding teams? And how does this affect their performance?
Well, we found several different mechanisms that copreneurs used to organize their work and their responsibilities differently. And in part, it was because going back to that, being in tune with not just somebody's career objectives as a founder, but also their professional objectives, who they want to be and how they want to be that person. So a deep appreciation for each other's personal and professional needs above the business needs is a consideration for their identity and their professional needs, which really comes back to how they organize the work so that they can both flourish, or two or three people can flourish. So it's again kind of going back to those metrics. How do you measure success? I'm not measuring success just by the profit, but whether or not my partner is flourishing as a business person. Are they able to take on new tasks, or are they able to, let's say somebody is really good about um, they're an extrovert and they're really good about sales and fundraising, and the other person is an introvert and more about back office things. Well, instead of pushing somebody into one role or the other, you can help them flourish so that they can become a better person and stronger in that area if you recognize that. And not to say that life non-life partners don't do that, but there's a bigger dedication. So the division of labor integrates home and work priorities that focus on the human needs. Um, and related to that, we talk about allocation of work equitably. So usually when you go to the office, well, the home life stops. You might talk about family, but you don't talk about your family needs, and you don't talk about your home values. So in a copreneurial relationship, you're able to allocate work across those boundaries and appreciate them and recognize the interdependence of home and work values. Um, that interdependence enables a fuller participation across domains, such as that they reciprocally influence each other, which is actually really an interesting way of building a business, the reciprocal relationship of different dimensions of your life. Now, values-driven organizing based on craft values really parallels family values. And so they're able to, again, talk about how these interrelate, and they can organize their companies likewise. And lastly, they're able to organize their work and responsibilities by living these, uh, by not prioritizing one over the other. So the shared values enable you to live those core values that support instead of prejudice one value over the other. And if you don't have that relationship, you're not life partners, inevitably the founding team will prioritize the business needs over anything else. And in copreneurship, you're able to talk about what that means and if that's the right thing to do as a couple. And so that enables you to maximize performance for both.
Professor, do your findings suggest that co-perennial advantage is transferable? That is, can non-couples replicate some of these benefits by intentionally building shared values and personal alignment?
I believe so. I think so. It's not easy, but I believe that it's possible. It's not going to be the same as starting a company with your life partner, but if you start your business with like-minded people, And this is where it's very, very difficult to understand if you're on the same page in terms of values and mission. Um, really understanding what's driving your co-founder is really challenging. You don't, I mean, it's kind of a warm, fuzzy, very personal conversation to have with a business person that you're founding a company with. And it's rather intimate. So it's difficult. However, sharing a technology or a passion about a technology or a passion about a mission isn't necessarily sufficient to succeed. So you need to understand what is driving the person behind the founder. Ventures that thrive are built by teams who commit to shared values and have a common understanding of how those things should be done. Everything from organizing work to how they think about profit. So, of course, that's not exclusive to life partners, but if you can develop a shared mindset early on, like life partners do, it can be a real advantage for a founding team.
What lessons from your research could be particularly helpful to couples thinking about starting a business together? Are there red flags or misalignment they should look out for before taking the plunge?
Oh, excellent question again. There are definite things that, well, let's just say that not all businesses founded by copreneurs had a rosy ending. Um, and nobody likes to see that. And when we saw that happen, it was that there was a breakdown, not just in terms of partnership, but in terms of how they wanted to enact the values. And they weren't on the same page. Something that arose that didn't come out as much in the paper is that teams, regardless of being copreneurs or not, who weren't on the same page values wise, just were incredibly challenged. And that you could feel the tension in their conversations. You could feel that one was prioritizing one thing over the other, and they weren't on the same metrics. So uh, we're talking about the values that underscore a business or personal domains. Things like, do you know what drives your partner? That, like I said, is intimate, but it really helps identify red flags that if one person is just incredibly focused on the technology and can't see anything other than the technology, it might be a red flag that they might not see the bigger picture of how they're going to enact a, a company or a mission. Um, how are they valuing success? Surprisingly enough, founders don't have that conversation early on. And you can have completely different exit strategies. Some people want to create a legacy and have a company that lasts for generations. Some people just want to be acquired really quickly. So knowing that ahead of time are huge red flags that misalignment needs to be identified. Um, and then what does the personal professional balance look like? Is there any? Um, you know, do you have any conversations about that? And founders need to agree on what metrics matter most to them. And if you don't have that, it's going to be an uphill climb ahead of you. Having those conversations with your co-founder early on will really help set you up for success.
Bean to Bar Chocolate is deeply connected to value driven production, ethics, sustainability, and craftsmanship. Do you think these findings apply to other value rich craft sectors like winemaking, coffee, co-roasting, and artisan baking?
Oh, definitely, definitely. And anything that has a deep, responsible core value that underscores the business, that underscores why you start a company, is going to have similar mechanisms. So understanding the values of the people and not just the people, but the supply chain behind it, the ecosystem, really isn't just about bean to bar chocolate. There are values driven ecosystems, and we're seeing more and more of them, especially when we see people talk about buy local or um, know your farmer or know your supplier. So as we see more and more of those develop, we'll see different metrics come out. So in craft fields, those dynamics are just more obvious.
Given that many family businesses involve siblings or parent-child pairs, how do life partner dynamics differ in terms of communication and commitment to business long-term vision?
Well, I think a lot of us can relate to this question just by thinking about, well, what are your conversations like with your siblings versus your conversations with your life partner? I would guess that those are very different conversations. So our work suggests that there's a power in coupling, an intimacy when it comes to business. And unlike parents and siblings, life partners actually choose each other. We don't choose our parents, we don't choose our siblings. We might have chosen them, but we actually choose our life partners. So that really creates a unique dynamic when it comes to family business. So as you build and grow your venture, you play more attention to your partner's needs, your personal development and strengths, and so that changes your commitment. And yeah, when we think about our parents or children or even siblings, it's a different way to think about what their needs are and how they develop. So the intimacy of copreneurs really brings about a different type of, we call it the power of coupling, that goes beyond the traditional family business dynamic.
Professor, my last question. What are some next questions or areas of exploration you are excited to study following this work? Do you see any potential for understanding how personal relationships shape other types of ventures or industries?
Oh, there are so many questions. Every time I work on a project, it seems like so many questions arise that I can't get into in one paper. And that's what makes being an academic exciting. That's what makes the research worth it, is that you can keep diving in and looking at these other things. I'm curious about how these dynamics play out in non-values driven fields. Um, Founders are humans, and we kind of forget the human side sometimes. And there's a lot of work on human capital and social capital, but what about the humans behind the faces, behind the experience, behind just a metric? Who are they, and what is their professional relationship or professional dynamic? How does that evolve in the founding team? So I am extremely interested in that. And then similarly, or on the flip side, I guess you could say, how do you foster values and foster value-driven communication in coprenarial settings? How do you have that rather intimate conversation with your co-founders to build a stronger venture when it is a very sensitive topic, or these things are very sensitive? And then the last question that keeps coming up to me is how values-driven entrepreneurs can support values-driven decision making in more economically driven settings. And what would that look like in more traditional settings that are becoming more responsive to the values of their ecosystem and their shareholders or stakeholders?
Listeners, that brings us to the end of today's episode. It's been a true pleasure to welcome Professor Jennifer Woolley and to dwell into the fascinating intersection of love, values, and business through her research, Love, Labor, and Chocolate, Why Copreneurs Thrive in Craft Businesses. Her insights remind us that successful ventures are often built not just on strategy and skill, but also on shared purpose, deep trust, and meaningful personal connections. Whether you are a couple thinking or starting a business together, a solo founder seeking value driven collaborators, or simply someone interested in how human relationships shape entrepreneurial outcomes, there's so much to take away from this conversation. A huge thank you to Professor Woolley for joining us and for sharing her rich experience and research on co-perennial ventures and craft entrepreneurship. Thank you once again, Professor Jennifer Woolley, for joining us today. We truly appreciate your time and commitment.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.